Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome inside the latest edition of Across the Cavs on Monday, May 22nd, the anniversary of LeBron James hitting the game-winning three against the Orlando Magic. Helped the Cavs avoid the 0-2 hole. Obviously, a series didn't go as they wanted, especially coming off a 66-win campaign, but a memorable one nonetheless. 14 years later, here we are, a couple of Cavs birthdays. Happy birthday to both Lowry Markkanen, one fantastic season, now an all-star in Utah, and to Jared Cunningham, the high flyer, who was well decorated in the art of the LeBron James post-game photograph. So plenty to come. We got Danny Cunningham, as you see, joining us. We got the intro. We'll introduce him in just a moment. This is Across the Cavs Network 216. Pleasure to welcome me on, Danny. Happy Monday to you, and it's great to go to talk some Cavs ball with you finally.
Appreciate you having me, Zach. Sorry we couldn't get this done sooner.
Well, it's better now because there's no pressure. We're not recording this right before a game, knowing that there's going to be some high stakes battle going down that immediately captures our attention, and we can get to the nitty gritty, but we can also keep it light, which I think for both of us is nice after what was probably a very long season for the Cavs.
Certainly, yeah. No doubt about that.
And so we'll start with you now covering the Cavs for the last couple of years. You didn't start out. Well, you did actually start with the Cavs. Then you kind of worked your way back. So what was your journey? Kind of get back to covering the Cavs full time that you've been doing?
Yeah, so it's been just that. It's been a journey. You know, I was here. My first job out of college was here at ESPN Cleveland. Was doing a lot of things, wearing a lot of different hats here. You know, I'd be producing shows. By the end, I was hosting some shows. I was doing a lot of, boots on the ground reporting with the Cavs, the baseball team, a little bit with the Browns, not a ton. Did that for right around 2 years. I'd say maybe a little bit longer than 2 years. Ended up getting a job in Madison, Wisconsin, and that was like my first full-time job on a beat somewhere. And I covered the University of Wisconsin football and basketball, and did a little bit of Milwaukee Bucks stuff as well. Like I'd be driving from Madison, Wisconsin to Milwaukee like twice a week, just because it was kind of like that was like a cherry on top. Like I knew I wanted to do NBA stuff, but that wasn't my primary focus. So it was kind of like if you get all this stuff done covering Wisconsin stuff, you can go cover Bucks games. So that was during the 2017-18 season. I was around there a lot. I tried to be at, as many Bucks games as I could be. And that was like the year before they got good. That was they lost to the Celtics in 7 games in the first round.
Great series.
Yeah, it was that was just the home team won every game, because that was that Celtics team that, if you remember, Kyrie got hurt. That he had that knee injury, and then he famously had surgery to fix his deviated septum, I think it was, before Game 7 against the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals that year, and he wasn't in the building for that. But I was in Milwaukee in Madison, during that time. Was there for a little over a year, and then I took a job covering the Timberwolves for about right around 2 seasons, which was my first day was the day before they traded Jimmy Butler. So and they were out west at the time, and I wasn't on that trip. So like I never actually crossed paths with Jimmy. Like I was there, I believe they lost to the Kings, and that was one of those games where Jimmy just decided like 90 minutes beforehand that he was out with what the team termed general soreness. So he didn't play. And then, that year was just kind of a disaster. They fired Tibbs. After like a 20-point win over the Lakers on a Sunday afternoon, they just decided that was the perfect time to can him. So I was there for that season, and then, right up until the pandemic. After that, did some freelance stuff, a lot of NBA draft stuff for Complex, and just some more, general NBA stuff during the bubble season and all that went on then. And then, I was brought back to ESPN Cleveland April of 2021 in more of a on-air role than necessarily a reporter role. But the day that the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell, I went into my boss's office and said, hey, we have to like really cover this team. We have to, maybe not as in-depth as the Browns, but we have to pour resources into them. And that is he said, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And when I said that, I didn't say I need to be the one doing this. obviously I was the one that was most qualified and whatnot, and it turned into me doing it. So, this year was my first year like full time on the Cavs beat. Thought it was a great experience, a really, really fun team to follow, despite what was obviously a disappointing postseason, a short-lived postseason, but really I thought was a great experience of a season.
And before you got into covering everything professionally, were you a Cavs fan in your youth, or who was your basketball team?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up loving LeBron. I was, I think, in the ninth or 10th grade when LeBron left for Miami. And, I was a heartbroken 15-year-old because I wanted the Cavs to win a title. Like, I thought that was the coolest thing. Those LeBron teams early on were so awesome, especially I know you mentioned today's the anniversary of that LeBron buzzer beater in game 2 against the Magic. Like, that team won 66 games. And I think just like as a fan, that was the most fun I ever had watching a basketball team because it felt like every time they'd roll the ball out, they were going to win. Like, that was so cool. And then even the next year, they won 60 games, and obviously that postseason was disappointing too. But I love the Cavs. Like, one of my memories, and I was in 7th grade. I still remember watching the game 5 in Detroit. LeBron had 25 straight, finished with 48 points. Like, I still remember watching that game on a TV that was about the size of my computer screen in my room as a 7th grader. I'm like, this is like, I could not believe what I was watching. And like, those are some memories that really still stick with me. And truthfully, stuff I'll never forget. Like, a big part of the reason why you and I are having this conversation right now is LeBron, because I really got into I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. And I started, writing and just kind of blogging like really small time stuff about LeBron and the Cavs and stuff like that during that summer of 2014 when he was figuring out if he was going to stay in Miami or come back to the Cavs or what was going to happen. Just like so much of my career is because of just finding all that stuff so cool and just LeBron being such a focal point of it.
Yeah, and a lot of what you said rings true. The most surprising detail to me is you had a TV in your room in 7th grade. What I would have loved to have had that.
It was not a nice TV. I'll tell you, like, it was at one point in my parents' basement,
Okay.
and my parents got a nicer TV for the basement it was still like a box TV. This was 2007. It's not like we had some flat screen down there or anything. But I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to put that one in my room and trying to get it to work right so I could get TNT on it. And just like I remember it was this small, crappy little TV, but it's what I watched one of the most important games of LeBron's career on. And that's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, that TV is always going to be part of the Danny Cunningham legacy when all is eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually, but everything you're saying is ringing true because you're about 1 year ahead of me. I remember going into high school. I remember my 4 high school years as LeBron's 4 Miami seasons, and despite becoming a Cavs fan because of LeBron, I grew up in Jersey, 30 minutes from the Meadowlands. So we used to have season tickets. So despite watching the Nets 20, 25 times a year, here I am when I'm 7 saying LeBron's going to make me a Cavs fan. And when he leaves, obviously a tough decision. I made the different choice than most. Most kind of wanted Miami to just lose and get destroyed. But for some weird reason, I really wanted him to get that first ring. And I said after I rooted for him to get that first ring, when he gets it, I hope he loses every game. So that last Spurs series, and obviously as we get older, we root a little differently. We start covering it more professionally. So you realize there's a lot more to it than just a fan in us. But as soon as he got that one title, it's like, all right, you're my least favorite player. Then he comes back 2 years later. We hit the reset button, and the Cavs do end up getting that title. So I guess it worked out for everybody.
It certainly did.
Certainly did. And before, obviously, you talked about, you got to school, you didn't know what you wanted. Growing up as a Cavs fan, do you have any memories, beyond those LeBron years from high school or college that maybe you found an inkling that this was what you wanted, that you wanted to eventually cover sports on a full-time basis?
I think once I started to do it, just like even super small time stuff, like I really liked it. Like I liked being around sports, and so I have a business degree, oddly enough. Like I went to Lake Erie College. It's a Division II school on the east side of Cleveland. I played football there. I had a full scholarship to play football, and I just wanted to play football and kind of see where that took me. I knew I didn't have plans of being in the NFL or anything like that, but that was kind of how I got there and what I wanted to do. And I thought, you can just kind of do anything with business, right? So the world just kind of took me there. And once I started writing about it and doing small time stuff, it was something I really liked. And then from there, I got an internship at ESPN Cleveland, and I got to be part of some really memorable things, whether it was Browns related or Cavs related or, baseball related. I thought it was really cool stuff, and it made me want to continue to do this. And then eventually taking the big step of moving away from everyone and everything, you kind of really find out whether or not you like it. Because there were a lot of nights living in Wisconsin where I had very few friends because it's hard to make friends as an adult, especially when you're living in a town that is mostly college kids and whatnot. But there are a lot of late nights and there's a lot of really hard work. And I think that's kind of when you find out whether or not you truly like something. And that's, I remember nights writing in the media room in the Bradley Center at 1:00 in the morning Central Time, knowing I have a 90-minute drive home ahead of me. And those are moments I wouldn't trade for the world. Like that was stuff that just made me really want to continue down this career path.
And after your 19 high school touchdowns, your 2 catches, your 3 kick returns in 2014 at Lake Erie, we're thankful as an entire myself and everybody who cheers for the Cavs, writes about the Cavs, talks about the Cavs, that we have the opportunity to see you. I had to do the stat research. As soon as you bring it up, I had to pull it up.
I don't know if that. So I missed the first couple of years when I was in school. I had a rash of injuries. I think in my 3 years playing football there, I had 5 surgeries. Like I got hurt a bunch, and that kind of gave me another. It kind of gave me another view of how things work in sports. And I think that's a big part of, getting to where I'm at, because it's, I played in, I think 8 games across 3 years. Like I had 3 shoulder surgeries. I had a couple of foot surgeries. Like I just couldn't get healthy, but I still loved sports enough that I wanted to be around it. Like I found out that I wanted to be around sports, even though I didn't get to be on the field as much as my body didn't let me be on the field as much as I wanted to. So that's kind of part of the story too.
But then obviously it's easier almost to cover anything once you've had hands-on experience playing at a high level, right? Because you're there, you've been in locker rooms, you've been with coaches, you've been with a team, you're part of something, and as you start to put together content, you keep all that in mind so that it's a whole unit.
Well, I also think, and obviously I will never know what it's like to be a professional athlete. And there are very few people who write about teams that know what it's like to be a professional athlete. But I know what it's like to be an athlete at a level that's higher than the vast majority of people. And it's not to say I was some star, because I wasn't. But I still know what it's like to be in a locker room with guys that did find their way to the NFL for a little bit. Like I know what that experience is like. And I do think that gives me just a little bit of a different perspective. Not entirely different, but I have some sort of clue of what it's like in there. So I do think that is something that's valuable that I carry with me.
And then as we continue here, we'll talk about the Cavs season. Pardon the train going by here on this Monday evening. So we look at the season, 51 regular season wins. Unfortunately, the 1 playoff win. The bright side of the 1 playoff win, it still marks the first in 25 years without LeBron James on the roster, going back to the Cedric Henderson, Brevin Knight team that took 1 game off of the Indiana Pacers. Is that one, obviously it's only been 1 year, Danny, but is that 1 playoff win, the Mitchell 40-point game record for the Cavs, scoring 70, enough to justify this trade 1 season in?
I think 1 season in, yeah, because I don't think it was a move that was made with just this season in mind. And obviously, we don't know the full scope of what that trade's going to look like when all the draft picks convey 5 years from now, or however long it's going to take those picks to go to Utah. Like if the Cavs are bad in 2029, say Donovan leaves, say other guys become unhappy and potentially leaves, and the Cavs are in rebuilding mode and they don't have their first round picks, then you're going to look at this trade differently. No doubt about that. I don't think that's going to be the case. Like I think kind of no matter what happens with Donovan, as long as Evan Mobley is around, they're going to be really good, because I just think he is such a floor raiser where I think that you're going to get to a point where Evan Mobley just being on the team and being available for like 75 games means that you're going to win 45 of those games. Like, just because he's that kind of player where he's going to just breed success. But I do think that as of right now, that trade was worth it. Now, if Donovan wants out, or if Donovan walks away when he becomes a free agent, then you absolutely start revisiting things. But I don't think with Mitchell having the best year of his career this year, I thought he should have been first team All-NBA. Frankly, I was surprised that Luka Doncic was first team All-NBA over Mitchell. Not to say Luka's not a better player, but Donovan had a much better season, in my opinion. I think it's absolutely worth that. Like, they traded for someone who I thought had one of the 5 best seasons in basketball. Yeah, Lauri Markkanen was awesome for the Jazz. Yeah, those draft picks might hurt someday. But if you ask the Cavs today, would they do that trade again? I think they say yes. And I think ultimately, if that's the answer, you have to kind of agree.
And especially considering that Colin Sexton would have been a huge piece of this year's team, seeing that unfortunately he struggled to stay healthy. And O'Shea didn't start really getting minutes, or Ochai rather, start getting minutes until about halfway through the season. So when you consider that, you would have essentially been running back exactly what you had. So definitely helps. And so unfortunately, though, the downside of that trade and of losing Kevin Love midseason was that the only 2 bigs that were going to get playoff minutes were coming from the starting lineup. One of those 2 guys really getting out-muscled, outmatched. Danny, I'm just asking this as an in-case, curious your thoughts. Does the Allen playoff dud mean that he had a bad season? Because I still feel like 1 year after All-Star, he's still extremely valuable, but it may have just shown us he's not as good as we thought he could be in the big moments.
I don't think that him being bad in the playoffs, which he was, and I thought he really owned up to that too at exit interviews with us. I don't think that means he had a bad season. I don't think his season this year was as good as it was last year. Like, I think that there were some areas where Jarrett Allen took a step back in 2022, 2023. Like, I think offensively, and maybe some of this is a product of the pieces around him changing, like having Donovan Mitchell meant that offensively he didn't do quite as much or was in different spots, and that's totally fine. But like, I thought that there were things defensively he didn't do quite as well throughout the season. I thought, and I could be wrong on this, but I thought, like, to the naked eye, it just seemed like he was a bit out of position more often on that end of the floor than he was in the past. He wasn't quite as good defending the rim as and listen, his All-Star season, he was stellar. Like, he belonged on that All-Star team. He was truly terrific. So him taking a bit of a step back this year, I don't think means like he's not good anymore. I don't think that's the case, but his season was good overall, but that playoff result, I think, certainly taints it for a lot of people. I don't think that I think it matters in the big picture, though, but I don't think it ruins what his season as a whole was.
And for the Cavs, their season as a whole, 1 playoff win, you get taken out by the Knicks. Big picture, 51 wins, 4th seed. Is this entire season in all a success?
That's a tricky question, because with that, there's no doubting the regular season was successful, right? Like, if you would have said before the year, hey, this Cavs team is going to win 51 games, they're going to have the best defense in basketball, they're going to have the 2nd best net rating in basketball, Evan Mobley is going to take a leap forward defensively, and I thought a significant step forward offensively. I still think his defense is pretty far ahead of his offense, and I don't think that there's going to be much debate around that. Darius Garland's going to take another step forward. Maybe Jarrett Allen takes a little bit of a step back. And Karis LeVert, I thought, had a really good season too. Like, if you would have told me all those things, I think a lot of Cavs fans would have been really, really happy with that result. But in the same breath, if you say, but they're going to lose in 5 games to the Knicks, they're kind of going to let go of the rope at the end, they're going to really struggle on the road throughout the season, then I think you start to get into, okay, was it a success? And it's going to sound weird, but I think, and I'm big into what do you learn about teams from things, right? Like, think back to, they lost the game to Miami in late January. It might have been January 31st. The next day or 2 days later, Cavs head coach J.B. Bickerstaff went on like a 4-minute rant. I think it was myself, Chris Fedor, and Kelsey Russo were like the only 3 reporters there. Evan Damaro might have been there as well too. And he talked about sort of like expectations and being ahead of schedule and positivity and all that stuff. And that just came after a loss where they very clearly had struggles with their late game offense, which had been a theme of the season to that point. Well, the next game was against Memphis. Dillon Brooks tries to fight everybody. The Cavs win the next 7, right? Like, we saw how they responded to that. If this front office for the Cavs and if this roster doesn't respond the way that they need to from this playoff loss to the Knicks, then I think we look at it differently. But let's say that this Cavs team next year wins 58 games, which I think that they are very much built for regular season success, 100%. And goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think we look back at this year a little bit differently just because, okay, they needed to take their lumps. Like, no team gets through unless you have LeBron, as we learned in 2015. No team just on their first run through the playoffs really thrives, right? Like, it's always a learning experience. So if the Cavs genuinely learn from this and fix their flaws and have a bit more toughness in the playoffs and do all those things, I just think we look back at it a little bit differently in hindsight.
Yeah, some very good analysis there, and we will see what next season brings. And we remind you, folks, if you sign up with Underdog Fantasy using promo code 216, they will match your first deposit up to $100. Again, that is promo code 216. They will match your first deposit up to $100. Jimmy Butler's Heat, kind of surprising in the first year, getting to the bubble finals, playing a big part in what they're doing now. We're going to talk about them in just a second. Obviously, the Denver Nuggets and what their 4th or 5th playoff go-around with Nikola Jokic, about to reach their first finals. We'll talk about that as well. But we start with the offseason, keeping it on the subject of the Cavs. And, yeah, that great winning streak after that wild Memphis game. The team's trending in completely opposite directions. Steven Adams ended up missing a ton of time right after. Grizzlies season kind of dropped a bit. They lost their top seed during that stretch. They were the clear-cut number 1 until that happened. So we look at free agency and what the Cavs have available and what they can spend. So any thoughts, Danny, on who you think the Cavs should sign, whether some Raptors, look at Boston's Grant Williams, or anybody else, or what the money they have to try and improve, or any guys they might even trade to see how we can trade?
I could see a guy like Grant Williams making some sense. I mean, they really need to upgrade on the wing. Like, I could see Gary Trent Jr. making some sense. I think that would probably have to be a sign and trade, just considering the money that he's going to command. But, like, if the Cavs are going to, and maybe Dante DiVincenzo too, that's another guy that could potentially be a fit. Max Strus, I know a lot of people with Miami going on the run you just mentioned, with the Heat on this run, he's someone that's kind of burst onto the scene as someone that's going to make a significant amount of money. But I could see if they're going to make a trade, right, like, you have to give up something of value to get something back. You're not trading Donovan this offseason. I would be floored if they trade Darius Garland. They're not trading Evan Mobley. That leaves, like, would the Cavs be comfortable moving on from Jarrett Allen or repurposing the money Jarrett Allen makes to someone that fits this roster a little bit better on the wing? I would think so. The other thing, I would be very surprised if Karis LeVert's not back with the Cavs. I think there's interest on both sides, both from the Cavs and LeVert, to have a reunion next year. I wouldn't sit here and say that he's part of the long-term vision. Like, I could see them signing him to a 3-year deal, and then next offseason he's part of a trade to try and repurpose himself into even something that fits a little bit better. But I think that those are kind of the places you want to go. Like, if I've spent a decent amount of the offseason so far trying to play around with the trade machine just to see what could be done with Jarrett Allen. And the only thing that I guess could be a hindrance here is because of how bad that playoff series was for him, his value is just a little bit lower than it would have been at other times, even after the regular season. So those are just kind of the things to think about. But it's clear this Cavs team needs more help on the wing. Isaac Okoro is a good defender. Teams are not going to guard him from the corner. Now, if he can be a higher volume 40% three-point shooter this season, that changes things. I don't know if that's possible, but that could be a difference. I just think that they need to get better on the wing without question. Because, hey, this is a league of wings, right? And the Cavs have 2 bigs and they've got 2 guards. And it's just something that needs to be solved a little bit better.
And then was there one trade in that trade machine? Obviously, it's tough. Was there one specific trade that you liked, that you saw, that you could see realistically actually happening this offseason with Jared Allen?
There's not one that I've been crazy about, and obviously things change with who might be available. There's a couple landing spots I think makes sense for Allen. Like I could see him in Dallas. Like that team very much needs a defensive-minded rim protector that could run to the rim and catch lobs. I think that makes a ton of sense. Even with Nick Claxton being in Brooklyn, I think that the Nets have a pretty good still. Like Jarrett Allen is in good standing in that organization. I think he could be helpful there. Like I could see him being sent with some other pieces to the Nets for maybe Joe Harris and Royce O'Neal, and see what else is out there as far as other pieces that could make sense. But that's kind of where I've been looking there.
And I'd be very okay. Obviously, he's had a couple of rough seasons with some good games included. I'd be very open to a Joe Harris reunion. I remember going to a game in Boston, LeBron's first time back, that 20-point fourth quarter comeback. And the funniest thing to me still, most people in the arena did not know who Joe Harris was. Loved that there was an entire UVA Joe Harris section right in front of me, and the ushers asking them, "Who are you here for? Who are you watching?" Like Joe Harris, who scored 6 points in the fourth quarter that day. So they let the usher and Boston know with that 20-point fourth quarter comeback where Rondo never got the ball out of his hands and was probably the biggest win of the season to that point in what was a tough start. So shout out. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Never forget that. We'll never forget where you were the first time you watched Joe Harris play in person. That's my takeaway. And then, so we talk about the postseason, and really, and the Cavs connection here is that the Heat doing this right now just goes to show that if you can win enough games and have a group that fights for each other, you don't have to necessarily be a top 3 team to run the gauntlet. Miami about to do it as an 8 seed, first team since the 99 Knicks. And I think the first team in the 4 out of 7 4-round era that would be going to a finals. But what's more surprising, and this might be a rhetorical question, Danny, but what's more surprising? Boston dropping 3 like they have, or Miami winning 3 like they have?
I think Miami getting to this point, I think, is the most surprising thing just overall as far as the playoffs go. Like I thought that they were going to lose to the Bucks in 5 games. And, maybe if Giannis doesn't get hurt, that's how that series ends up. We'll never know. What Miami's done has been incredibly, incredibly impressive. I thought that after having to play a 7-game series, Boston was always going to be a little bit disadvantaged in game 1. I was surprised they dropped game 2. And then I didn't necessarily expect them to win game 3 in Miami. But I didn't think that they would let go of the rope that they did, right? Like we watched Boston last night quit. Like that's exactly what happened. And to see that happen to a team that has been to the finals, a team that has been to, what is this, their 5th Eastern Conference final, 4th or 5th Eastern Conference final in the last 7 years?
Yep.
To watch them just be broken like that was really surprising to me. Like I didn't expect, once they were down 2-0, I thought Miami's going to win the series. I didn't think Boston, because of so many issues that team has, I didn't think that they were capable of winning 4 of the next 5 against this Miami Heat team. But I didn't think we'd watch them quit the way that they did. So I guess that's probably the most surprising thing from this series. Not that Miami's up, not that Boston's down, but that Boston just let go of the rope in that manner this deep into the playoffs is surprising.
And then similarly, what's been more surprising? How bad Jaylen Brown has been, or how good Duncan Robinson, now the all-time leader in made playoff threes in Heat history, has been. $18 million a year. He's redeeming that contract and then some right now.
I guess I have to go with Duncan Robinson, right? Because players are going to go through hot stretches and cold stretches. Like Jaylen Brown being bad right now, and there might be some stuff going on otherwise with his contract situation. He's due for that extension this year. I know there's been some just talk on social media about what he could end up getting, where he could end up being, whether or not Boston should separate him and Tatum. And like all those things could play a factor. But Duncan Robinson was just not in Miami's rotation for the majority of the year. Like for him to come out and be a playoff hero, played in 42 games this year. And I would have to think most of those were garbage time. He had 1 start this year. He started 68 games last year, had 1 start this year. Largely just a non-factor for Miami. And what he's been doing in this playoffs it's unbelievable, really. I mean, to go out and score 22 and 15 in the last 2 games is remarkable. I know he didn't have a good game 1, but still, he was – I'm stunned that he has gone from a guy that earned what you said, $18 million a year,
Yep.
to not playing to now being a playoff star it's ridiculous. And that's just really how I feel about Miami because, yeah, Jimmy was awesome all year, and Jimmy's awesome, right? He's so good. Bam, to a lesser extent, really, really good. The rest of that team stunk all year, and now those guys have all stepped up in the playoffs. That's really been surprising to me.
And it's crazy that 2 years in a row, Tyler Hero goes down early in the playoffs. And Tyler Hero's return was supposed to be the Game 7 difference last year. I think he played 5 minutes because he wasn't right enough to go. But, yeah, it's been impressive. And the last thing I do have to ask you, obviously, being around the Cavs the last couple of years that he was there, what impact, statistically we know it's very little, but what impact do you think Kevin Love has had on the Heat as they've made this run along with Udonis Haslem?
I think that he's a great guy to have in the locker room. And, he has hit some shots in the playoffs. I think that the on-court impact was a little bit overblown. There was a reason he wasn't playing for the Cavs when he asked for a buyout. It's because he wasn't playing very well. I think after that thumb injury I think it was against Charlotte back in November, from that point on, he shot 27 or 28% from three, and that's an issue. Before that, he was shooting 40%. He was awesome. If you think back to that game in Cleveland, they won against the Knicks early on. I think he hit 8 threes. Him and Dean Wade were both awesome. And then, by the end of the year, Kevin was gone and Dean was out of the rotation because he couldn't hit a shot either. So I do think he has an impact on that locker room. I think it's something that the Cavs should not have done. Where buying him out, it made sense from a standpoint of wanting to, do right by the player or whatnot. But I think that even though he was struggling, there should have been some sort of place for Kevin in the rotation. And I also, because it's very clear that for times throughout the year that injury was bothering him, that thumb injury. I didn't understand. And with Dean having the shoulder injury at the same time, it kind of did put the Cavs between a rock and a hard place. But my thinking was the Cavs should have just sat him down for 3 weeks and let that thumb heal. Let it rest. Just take it easy. They didn't need him in January and February. They needed him when the games mattered. And I thought that probably could have solved a lot of their problems if they would have just let him rest, put him on the injury report every day instead of trying to have him play through that injury. And, that is a communication thing on both sides. I don't know if Kevin was the one really pushing to play or what the deal was there. But just on the outside looking in, that's what made the most sense to me, and that never happened. But I think it's disappointing that Kevin's tenure in Cleveland ended the way it did, because he was and his jersey will go up one day, and I think he'll always be beloved in Cleveland, and he should be. But to have it come to an end like that, especially after all the valleys that the relationship between him and the franchise had gone through when the Cavs were not good, right? That stuff was very well reported out by people on the beat. But for him to come back and have the great year he had last year, where he finished second for Sixth Man of the Year, he was just awesome. To have it end as part of a 51 team asking for a buyout in February just kind of should make a lot of people sad.
Yeah, for both. Obviously, it's great we got Varejao back, even though it took 5 years. But to think that, obviously, they won the ring with Channing Frye, but similarly, the way they traded Varejao after he had gotten healthy after all the injuries he dealt with, really very different points in very different seasons, but tough that both of those guys.
I think it's different because I don't think that the Cavs win that title without Channing Frye. I realize, and it's crazy to say about a guy who's not in the rotation in the finals, right? It was a bad matchup against the Warriors for him for a number of reasons. But I think that the impact Channing Frye had on that locker room was significant. And that's not to say that Anderson Varejao didn't always have a good impact on the locker room, because he did. But I think Channing Frye, adding the shooting that they added there, I think that he was a big piece of why they won. Maybe not a big piece, but he deserves some credit for that.
Oh, for sure.
They got nothing back, right? They just let him walk for nothing. And that's just where I think those things are very different.
Oh, for sure. And it was the spacing he added and the chemistry him and RJ had with the rest of the locker room, which we saw through their podcast and how they're doing road tripping. So I agree, but it's tough for both of them that they couldn't stay through what was an important season for both of them. But I do expect before he retires, Kevin Love may play one more game with the Cavs. I don't know what that looks like, how it happens. At least I hope we'll see what his career does. My personal hope for him, he's never lost a playoff series in the East. Get one more win and get to a 5th straight finals off a playoff appearance. That's the best.
You're right. He never has. I had not thought about it like that, but yeah, I mean, he's lost a couple play-in games, but never a playoff series.
Yeah, never lost a playoff series. And now we finish up with his pal, both for you and I and the whole Cavs organization, their old friend LeBron James. He's 38. Austin Reeves about to hit free agency. Anthony Davis is healthy for an entire playoff run this deep for the first time since the bubble, and obviously the time off helping that. And obviously they're not out yet. The game, folks, by the way, this is about 7:40 p.m. Eastern. The game tips off in an hour, so anyone watching this after this was done before the game. Is this LeBron's last chance at a ring? Is this 0-3 comeback his last chance in the NBA to win a ring?
I don't think it's his last chance because I think LeBron still has a few years left in him. I think that this is probably his last chance as the best player on the team to win a ring, though. Just because of how good Anthony Davis has been. Like, if the Lakers are in this spot next year, and who knows, maybe it's different. Maybe LeBron's healthier. Like, I think that foot is very clearly hampering him, that he suffered that injury in March and missed a few weeks. Like, I think that's still a really big deal, and I think that's part of the reason why a lot of that burst is gone, not because he's 38. Like, he was 38 earlier this year and looked great, but the foot injury, I think, has slowed him down. So maybe I'm wrong about that. But I also, I don't think LeBron's going to spend the rest of his career with the Lakers. I think wanting to play with his son is a very real thing. And who knows, that could be on a really good team that has a chance to win a ring. And LeBron could win another ring like that. I guess the best way I could put it is this was probably LeBron's last great chance at winning a finals MVP again. But I would not be surprised if LeBron has another ring. I think that is certainly possible, but him being the best player on a team to do that, I'm not so sure that can happen.
And final question for you, then we'll wrap up. And this might be silly because it's such a small thing, obviously, not to take away from Nikola Jokic and Jimmy Butler and what they've done. But if LeBron does get a 5th ring, whether it's this comeback or another one, how much do you think that would sway the MJ is better than LeBron crowd into possibly believing that LeBron is the best player?
I think people are going to think what they want to think anyways. I've thought LeBron's the greatest player probably since 2016. Seeing what he was able to do in that series, I just don't think there's ever been anyone in basketball history capable of controlling and dominating the game in as many different ways as LeBron has. I don't think him adding a 5th ring at 39 or 40 or 41 or whatever it's going to be is going to sway a lot of people. I think that by now, especially once LeBron took over the helm as the all-time leading scorer, something which truthfully he had for quite some time when you think about regular season and playoffs, the gap between him and number 2, who I think is Michael, in playoff scoring is almost 3,000 points at this point. It's bigger than the gap from number 2 to number 10. That's just how long he's been doing this and how dominant he's been. But I think that people are going to think what they already think. I think that discussion for the most part has been written. Now, if LeBron next year goes out and let's say the Lakers win the title and LeBron is the best player on that team, he's healthy, he's awesome. He's still averaging 25 points a game and 6 rebounds and 8 assists, and he's a finals MVP at 39 years old. Maybe that'll sway some people. I think that's just more ammunition for folks like myself who think he is the greatest player of all time because, Michael was not doing that at 39 in year 21. No one in NBA history has been doing that in year 21. But ultimately, if you think at this point LeBron's the greatest player, nothing's going to change your mind. If you still think Michael is the greatest player, maybe another ring from LeBron where he's awesome and wins another finals MVP can change your mind. But even then, if LeBron's done all this and you still don't believe it, I'm not sure you ever will.
Some good analysis from Danny Cunningham, beat writer for the Cavs. A pleasure, Danny, that we could do this, and looking forward to doing it again when we got some Cavs news, whether it's signings, trades, draft picks, anything. But been a pleasure, man. Looking forward to the next one.
Appreciate you having me, Zach.
So he's Danny Cunningham, Zach Weiss, and we will see you next time on Across the Cavs on Network 216.